Thank you, Charlene and Kendall, for being here. We are super excited for another event by the Parent Education Series. For those of you who are not familiar, St. Matthew's has partnered with Parent Education Series, and they have provided us so far 2 wonderful speakers. Last year, we had a speaker on compassion, and then we also had a speaker on the self-driven child. This year, we are pleased to kind of focus on the purpose for our children, and we're really excited for this evening. So without further ado, thank you for Charlene for organizing our speaker tonight, and I will pass it over to you. And thank you to all of our parents who have made time out of their busy life to sit back and enjoy this presentation. It's so important for us, supporting our parents.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peterson. Your being here and introducing us means everything. It shows your families that you care about high quality parent education. So we are delighted to partner with you and really happy to be here tonight to talk about something very important, helping children and teens lead lives of purpose. We could not be more excited to welcome Dr. Kendall Bronk this evening. But before I introduce her and get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about the logistics for tonight. So again, this is an important topic. I know that it's something at the top of the list here at St. Matthew's School, where you talk a lot about character development and purpose. So again, could not be a more important thing to talk about, especially in the middle of a pandemic. We are grateful again to St. Matthew Catholic School and especially Principal Peterson. Without their sponsorship, we would not be here this evening. So tonight, Dr. Bronk is going to have about 45 minutes of content. She'll be talking to you again about purpose and strategies for parents. So this will be a very practical talk. We really want you to be able to build these skills in your children. After that, we will have time for questions. So I doubt that any of you are not familiar with Zoom, but again, the buttons are along the bottom. So you can make comments to one another or us in the chat, but please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. So questions and Q&A. I will rejoin Dr. Bronk at the end for some questions. We have some that have come in earlier, and we welcome your questions live. So please do that. If you can, we ask that you keep the questions kind of brief and that you keep them kind of general. So those are our 2 requests. All right, let's get started. Dr. Kendall Bronk is a professor of psychology in the Division of Behavioral and Social Sciences at Claremont Graduate University, one of the Claremont colleges in Southern California. She is a developmental scientist interested in understanding and supporting the positive development and moral growth of young people. Most recently, she has investigated these topics through the lens of young people's purposes in life. Work in her Adolescent Moral Development Lab, which has been supported by grants from the Spencer Foundation, the John Templeton Foundation, and the Fulbright Foundation, is focused on addressing 2 primary questions around purpose. First, what does purpose look like among diverse groups of young people, including youth growing up amidst a global economic challenge? And second, how can we help youth discover the things that give their lives purpose? To that end, she and her colleagues have designed and tested strategies for fostering purpose among adolescents and young adults. She has published extensively on purpose and positive youth development in leading peer-reviewed journals and books, and her research has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, NBC Education Nation, and NPR. Please join me and Dr. Peterson in a really warm welcome for Dr. Kendall Bronk. Thank you, Kendall. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be able to share with you some of the research that I've conducted and some research that my colleagues have conducted. Give me just one moment while I share my screen so I can bring up the slides. Great. And we'll go ahead and get started. So again, I just want to say thank you for having me here. Before the webinar got started, I was talking about how as a researcher, we do lots of really exciting research. It's such an inspiring topic to study, purpose in life is. And yet, you know, we write these things up and often they go on shelves and not too many people read it. And so it's really exciting to be able to share the research with folks who can actually use it. So I'm excited to be talking to parents tonight. And to share with you what we've learned about purpose in the research. So I've really studied this topic for quite some time now, for about 15 years. When I first started in the field, I was a grad student actually at Stanford, so not too far from you. And at the time, there was very little psychological research on the topic. Since then, though, the body of research has really grown considerably. So I have a lot of research to draw on that I'll be sharing with you for tonight. I've studied purpose among youth across the country, including among youth from low-income backgrounds, from middle income, and from wealthier backgrounds. I've studied purpose among adolescent and young adult cancer survivors. I've also studied purpose among youth around the world. So we did some research in Taiwan. We've done research in Greece, particularly at the height of the Great Recession. And I've studied purpose among street children in Liberia. So I've really been fortunate to see what purpose looks like in a pretty broad range of contexts. And I've learned a lot in my own research and also through my colleagues' research about how parents can help their children and adolescents discover and pursue a really meaningful purpose in their own lives. So again, I'm eager to share what I've learned with you tonight. So here's the plan for tonight. First, I want to talk a little bit about what it is that I mean when I say purpose in life. I'll explain exactly what that phrase means as we use it in a research context. Next, I want to review some of the research that outlines the benefits of leading a life of purpose. And so, in other words, I'll try to spell out to you why the research suggests that you as parents should care about this topic. After that, I'll get into some empirically supported strategies that parents can use to help their children and adolescents discover a purpose in their life. And this is actually where I'll spend the bulk of my time. And then finally, as was already mentioned, I'll leave some time at the end to answer questions. So before I get too deep into this topic, I wanted to ask you to do something, and that is to reflect for just a moment or two on what gives your life purpose. What is it that you really care about? What matters to you? What are you trying to accomplish in your life? So take a moment, think about it. So this is a pretty big question, and probably the few seconds that I gave you there, not enough time to figure everything out, and I get that. But I do want to encourage you to think about this maybe later on, because if you really want to help your children identify their purpose in life, you're going to be better prepared to do that if you have a sense of what gives your own life purpose. So again, maybe tuck that question away until a little later and reflect on it a bit. All right, so as I said, I wanted to start with a definition. So when we think about purpose in life, you probably have a pretty clear picture of what it is that I'm talking about. And yet when we do research, when we conduct research on this topic, it's really important that we have a definition that is very clearly spelled out, that we can all sort of, as researchers, agree upon, and that can be operationalized or measured in empirical studies. So to that end, my colleagues and I have proposed the following definition, and this definition has actually been used pretty widely in research. So this definition suggests that a purpose in life is a long-term, forward-looking intention to accomplish aims that are both meaningful to the self and of consequence to the world beyond the self. So that's a bit of a mouthful. Let me see if we can sort of highlight some of the key dimensions here. The first is that a purpose in life is a goal of sorts. It's not a short-term objective, but instead it's more of a long-term sort of far horizon aim that really motivates you, that motivates your activities on a daily basis, that orients the ways that you make decisions. And the second component is that a purpose is really personally meaningful. It's something that people care very deeply about. And in empirical research on purpose, we look for evidence that something is really personally meaningful by looking for the extent to which people are actually acting on this. So what is the intention that they're working toward? And are they actively engaged in making progress toward it, dedicating their time, their energy, and their personal resources towards being actively engaged in working toward this intention? And then the third component is that in addition to being of consequence to the self or to the individual, a purpose in life also matters to the broader world. And what I mean is that this intention, this long-term, really personally meaningful intention that you're working toward, it's motivated, at least in part, by a desire to make a difference in the broader world, to contribute in some way to the world around you. So taking that together, we can think about a purpose as it's like a beacon that kind of guides your daily activities, motivates your daily actions toward a particular end, a really personally meaningful end, and an end that enables you to, like I said, contribute to the broader world in some way. So based on this definition, we find that young people today, they find purpose in a really wide variety of activities, including in serving their God, in creating works of art, in supporting social and political change, in serving their communities, and in caring for their families. So there are lots of different ways in which we find that young people today, discover different inspiring sources of purpose in life. All right, so now we're on the same page about what constitutes a purpose in life. And I want to talk a little bit about why this is a topic you should care about. Why is this something that that you should make an active effort to encourage in your children? Well, a growing body of research finds that compared to individuals without a clear purpose in life, those with a purpose report a whole variety of indicators of better physical health. So things like better cardiovascular health, less chronic pain, and particularly relevant to younger children, better sleep. I always find that kind of remarkable. Individuals with a purpose in life actually report fewer sleep disturbances than individuals without one. Some pretty compelling research emerged that suggested that individuals with a purpose in life, they actually live longer lives, which again, I find to be pretty remarkable. So given these pretty powerful findings, researchers have become increasingly interested in trying to understand what is the mechanism behind which a purpose in life might contribute to these physical health, positive physical health outcomes. Epigenetics researchers look at the way that our biology, our genes, are really shaped by our experiences in the environment. And here, researchers are finding that leading a life of purpose actually results in a more healthy genetic profile. In particular, it has to do with our immune response. So it's not just that purpose coexists with these physical health indicators. Purpose actually seems to help contribute to confer these physical health, positive physical health outcomes. In addition to being associated with physical health, having a purpose in life has also been shown to contribute to better psychological health. So individuals with a purpose compared to others report that they are more hopeful, happier, and more satisfied with their lives. And then of interest to us here in an academic setting, we also have a lot of research that suggests that purpose is associated with a pretty wide range of indicators of academic success. So including things like grit, right? The ability to kind of stick with it, stick with the tough schoolwork. Resilience, or the ability to bounce back when we have challenges at school. And also with academic efficacy, which is really the belief that a student has that they can master their own schoolwork, that they can really master the content. So all of these indicators of academic success are much more prevalent among individuals with purpose than they tend to be among individuals without purpose. I saw an interesting study that actually found that young people with purpose reported that their schoolwork was more meaningful than individuals without purpose. And I think this makes sense, right? If you know what it is that you really want to accomplish with your life, and you can see how your schoolwork might help get you there or help you make progress in that direction, of course your schoolwork is going to feel more meaningful to you. All right. So despite the many benefits of leading a life of purpose, we find that most young people, and in fact, even most adults, report that they don't have a purpose in their lives, or at least they don't know what the purpose is in their lives. Research finds that only about 1 in 10 early adolescents and 1 in 5 high school age youth reports having a purpose in life. The numbers get a little better in the college years, where about 1 in 3 college age youth report that they have a purpose in life, but it's still a minority of individuals. So what I wanted to kind of highlight here is that it's not the case that purpose always takes root on its own. Sometimes parents and others have to get involved. I did want to point out too, I didn't report any statistics here for children, and so children younger than, say, early adolescence. And that's because, of course, we don't really expect young children to have a clear sense of purpose in life. That's something that doesn't happen until later on. But despite that, there are lots of things that parents can do with younger children, with elementary school age children, and certainly with middle school age children, to help set the stage for purpose, so that as their children get older, when they're developmentally ready to discover a purpose for their life, they're inclined to do so. And that's what we'll be talking about this evening. So again, I just wanted to sort of reiterate this point that although a purpose in life is a good thing, it's not always something that children, or I should say adolescents and even adults, figure out just naturally or on their own. A lot of times they do need help. And this is, of course, where parents come in. So knowing that purpose is beneficial in the range of ways that I just talked about, and knowing that it is relatively rare, I do want to turn my attention now to talking about ways that we can encourage the development of purpose among young people. And I'm going to start with younger children, so 5, 6, 7-year-olds, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that parents can do, some of the things that the research suggests parents should do to help their younger children discover what matters most to them when they get older. So here we are. So again, I'm thinking of children who are, 5, 6, maybe 7 years of age. And as I said before, we definitely don't expect children this young to have a clear purpose in life. They shouldn't. Cognitively, they're not prepared to engage in the kind of abstract thinking required to really seriously reflect on something like a purpose in life. And of course, they shouldn't be making long-term commitments given how young they are. But as I mentioned, there are a lot of people who just have a really important purpose later in life, who draw the origins of that back to their childhood. And research suggests, as I noted, that there are some things that parents can do to help increase the likelihood that as their children get older, that they will develop a purpose then. So one of the first things that's really important, well, I'm actually going to outline a number of strategies that parents can employ with some of these younger children. But they all kind of share one thing in common, and that is that you really want to help your young children see that what they do matters, that they're not too young to give back and contribute to their families, to their schools, and to their communities in really significant ways. So obviously, when we think about young children, the focus is almost exclusively on what we as parents and teachers, what we can do for them. And of course, this is appropriate. I mean, young children, they need our help. But at the same time, we also need to remember that young people can be very useful, and we want to help them see how they can be useful. Because not only does this, help them to see how they can start to give back, it's actually associated with a range of other positive outcomes, things like enhanced self-esteem and other sort of positive outcomes.
The idea here is to, try to get creative, but whatever you do, try to find different ways of helping your younger children give back and be useful, whether it's to the family or to the community, and talk to them about it. Talk to them about the difference they can make in their families and in their community and in their school. This message is really important for preparing them for purpose later in life. So again, although this is a strategy that's particularly relevant to younger children, certainly you can have older children do chores and volunteer in the community as well. So this isn't something that only younger children can do. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about strategies we can use for slightly older children. So now we're getting into maybe 8, 9, 10, maybe 11-year-olds. Again, these children too are still obviously too young to have a really clear sense of what their purpose in life is. But as with the younger children, there are things that we can do now to help them figure it out down the road. So again, just to reiterate, these slightly older children, they can certainly do things like do chores and do, find ways of giving back and contributing to their communities and their families and their school. But I think there's some other things that we can try with these slightly older children too. So one of the things that the research finds that's really effective for cultivating purpose is to actually encourage what we call a grateful mindset. And this might seem kind of counterintuitive, but the research here is pretty clear. Helping your children really focus on the blessings in their lives and on the people who have blessed them, it tends to incline them to start to think about how they might want to give back. So one way you can do this is through what we call the 3 good things exercise. So you can go around the dinner table at night or, as a part of your routine, tucking your kids into bed at night. But ask the children on a regular basis, what are 3 really good things that happened to you today? And ask the children to talk about it and to be specific and to go into some detail. Again, this is a way to really help them focus on the blessings in their life. Another way to do this is to ask your children to write a gratitude letter. So a gratitude letter is a little like a thank you letter, but it's not for a particular gift. Instead, it's more of a general letter of thanks and gratitude to someone who has helped them out. And this might be a special teacher, a special coach, an extended family member, somebody who's really gone out of their your child to write about in this letter. The first thing is you want the child to really express how they have benefited from the help. So, my son's had a baseball coach one year who was really wonderful about teaching my son to pitch. And my son really wanted to learn to pitch. So his coach would stay late after practice for weeks, helping him learn to pitch. I thought that was a nice example. So my son wrote him a gratitude letter and he said, I'm really grateful that I learned to pitch. And that's how, my son benefited. The second thing, though, is in this letter, in addition to expressing how the child has benefited, you want them to acknowledge that the helper has incurred some kind of cost. Maybe this is cost in the form of time or energy. So again, in my son's letter, he talked about how, his coach was really very kind to take time out of his own busy schedule to stay late at baseball and help him with his pitching. And then the third thing that you want your child to express in this letter is an appreciation and a recognition that the helper chose your child to really focus, to be the target of their help or their assistance. Obviously, my son's baseball coach could have chosen to help somebody else on the team learn to pitch, but he knew it was something important to my son. And I think my son was really grateful that he targeted his energy towards really helping my son in this regard. So these things are important to include in the gratitude letter. And the research finds that people who habitually practice gratitude, they're inclined to think about giving back. And as people reflect on the many blessings in their lives, they're likely to feel somewhat indebted. And one way of relieving this sense of indebtedness is to give back or to pay it forward. And so encouraging this grateful mindset in your children and look for signs that maybe it has begun to encourage them to want to think about ways that they want to give back. And obviously, if you see that, you want to encourage that as well. All right, moving right along. Another strategy that you can employ for elementary school age children is this focus on sparks. So Peter Benson is a wonderful researcher at the Search Institute, and he really pioneered this research on sparks. Now, sparks are those activities that children are really passionate about. They're the things that the children just light up, right, when they do this. Often sparks represent children's special gifts or their special talents. There's something they're really good at. And later on in life, these sparks often give way to purpose. So the spark may be the medium that a young person ultimately decides to use to sort of enact their purpose. So pay attention to the things that your children really enjoy doing. Pay attention to the things that they light up about. Pay attention and recognize them for these activities. And to the extent that you can, help them cultivate and really develop these sparks. All right, so now we're getting up to slightly older children. We're getting into to adolescents. These are like the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds in our midst. This is where young people, they really are for the first time cognitively ready to start to think about developing a purpose in life. They're, from a cognitive perspective, they're ready to reflect on abstract ideas like a purpose in life. And you might be thinking, wow, this is awful young, 12, 13, 14, and they're already, some young people are already thinking about their purpose in life. And they are. For some people, it is too young. As I said before, only about 1 in 10 young people is actually settled on a purpose in life. I should say 1 in 10 early adolescents. But what I want to convey is that they are thinking about these things. 12, 13, and 14-year-olds, they are thinking about these things. And one of the reasons they are is that purpose formation really goes hand in hand with identity development. So as young people begin to consider who they want to become, they're also likely to reflect on what they would like to accomplish in their lives. And identity development definitely gets underway in early adolescence. That said, identity development doesn't often wrap up until the mid-20s. So keep in mind that your early adolescent is certainly going to be ready to talk about these things in a way that younger children can't. But it's okay if they haven't identified a purpose for their lives. Again, though, there are things that we can do at this age to help encourage them to do so when they have, so they'll have the tools to identify their purpose when they're inclined to do so. So one of the first things that you might think about with early adolescence is really modeling purpose. Talk about the things that give your life purpose. Maybe you find purpose at your job. If this is the case, talk about it with your children or with your early adolescents. Alternatively, maybe you find purpose in the volunteer work that you do, or through your religious faith, or maybe even through being a parent. If this is the case, again, talk about it with your children. Share this with them. Let them see what the purpose looks like in your own life. However, I do want to point out one sort of important caveat here. Be authentic. Don't lie to your adolescents. They'll see right through you, and that will not help your cause. Adolescents, as you probably know, if you happen to be the parent to one, are very attuned to things like inauthenticity. So just be careful about that. Another thing that we can focus on is focusing on this far horizon timeframe. So early in my research on purpose, my team and I were involved in a study designed to figure out, first of all, how prevalent was purpose among young people in the world today. That was one of the questions we wanted to explore. And the second one was, what does a purpose look like in the lives of young people today? So to address the first question, we administered surveys to more than 1,000 young people across the country. And to address the second question, we conducted interviews with a randomly selected subset of those surveyed youth. And first, when we administered the surveys, and it was about 9 months later that we got started on the interview part. Like we just randomly selected a subset of those young people who had participated in our survey and had them participate in interviews. And the interviews just focused on, what really matters to you? What do you care about? What do you want to accomplish in your life? And why? Why are these things important to you? And we were surprised by the feedback that we got from young people. They seemed to really enjoy the interviews. They told us, nobody ever asks me about these things. And some of them said, would you be willing to share the audio recording? We had recorded the interviews. We had other young people ask if we would share the transcripts with them. But it was clear that they really enjoyed this conversation about purpose, and that this isn't the kind of conversation that adolescents regularly have with adults in their lives. So we began to wonder, is it possible that this interview, this one-time 45-minute conversation, was some kind of accidental intervention? As luck would have it, we had planned to collect surveys again after the interview. So we did look at the young people who had participated in the interviews, their survey scores from time one, before the interview and after the interview. And we compared them to the young people who didn't participate in the interviews. And we looked at their purpose scores from time one and time two. And lo and behold, we found that those young people who had participated in this one-time interview had significantly higher levels of purpose at time two. So it turned out that this one-time conversation was really powerful. Now, I share this story with you for two reasons. First, I share it because talking with young people about the things that matter most to them and about what it is that they want out of their lives is a really important way of helping them identify their purpose in life. All too often, we focus really on short-term things, right? What class are you going to take next year? What are you going to do this weekend? Maybe even what college do you want to apply to? But rarely do we really step back and ask young people, what is it that you want out of your life? How do you want to leave your mark? What do you want to accomplish? And it turns out that adolescents are really very eager to have these kinds of conversations. So the second reason that I tell you this story is that I want you to realize that cultivating purpose is very possible. I mean, this one-time interview had these effects, and if a one-time conversation with a stranger can have an intended effect, certainly efforts by parents are likely to make a big difference, a really significant difference. So consider engaging your adolescents in these kinds of conversations that don't focus so much on the here and now and not even on the immediate future, but instead on this really far horizon time frame. All right. So I want to kind of go back and just sort of highlight the activities that we've talked about up to this point. These are things that I did associate them with particular ages, but you know your children best. And if some of these activities might work for older or younger children, then I say go for it. But consider asking your children to do chores. And it's not just the act of doing the chore, but it's also the conversation around it. Talk about how it's important for all family members to contribute to the household and how we really need and value children's contributions in this regard as well. Encourage your children to find ways to give back in their communities, to volunteer. Again, here, it's really important, not just that they do the volunteer work, but that you engage them in conversations that help them reflect on the experience, reflect on how they felt about this, this opportunity to give back, how they felt about it, and about the difference that they felt that they were able to make. This reflection is really very key. The third thing that we talked about is cultivating a grateful mindset. So focus on the blessings, help your children to focus on the blessings in their lives. Doing this will, as I said, incline them to start to think about ways that they want to give back. Yet another strategy is to really recognize, validate, and encourage their special interests and their skills or their sparks. Because these later on, they might give way to purpose. I always love the example of a high school student in my own town. I was talking with his mother and she was saying, he's always loved technology and he's always been involved in technology and really quite good with technology. And, so she allowed him to take all kinds of coding classes and encourage this interest. And when he was in high school, his grandmother moved into a retirement home. And he decided that he wanted to use his skills in technology to help connect older adults with their loved ones. So he went over to the retirement community once a week, and he would help get them up and running on Skype and Zoom and things like this. This was before this global pandemic, but I would imagine the older adults were particularly grateful for the help, or would have been, today when they really rely on this. But he did other things too. He used this special skill in technology, and he applied it in a way that mattered to him. He, adored his grandma, and he wanted to help her and her friends become better able to use technology. So he was his own tech support for the retirement home, which I thought was really a lovely way of taking his spark and using it to help people in the community. The other thing that we talked about was modeling purpose. So think about, what your purpose is and talk about it with children. This will help them recognize it in their own lives. Here again, I just remind you to be authentic, especially with adolescents. They, like I said, are very attuned to that. And then finally, have conversations with your adolescent about the things that they really most hope to accomplish in their lives. Ask them what really matters to them and why. One, I think, opportunity for this is actually around the college selection process. So we have done some work with slightly older adolescents. I realize that 8th graders aren't quite there yet, but they will be. And as young people start to think about applying to colleges, that's actually one place where they are encouraged to really reflect on their purpose. It used to be that the college essay was called your statement of purpose. So I think as you think about colleges, to encourage students or your students to think about what is their purpose and how they can write sort of a purpose-inspired college essay, and think about identifying a college that will help prepare them to, give them the skills and the experiences that they need to go out and live a life of purpose. So each of these activities should really help your child to discover their own purpose in life. I also did want to call your attention to a few additional purpose resources. So the first one is a book. This is called The Path to Purpose: How Young People Find Their Calling in Life, written by William Damon, who is a professor at Stanford. And this book, you'll recognize some of the things that we talked about here in that book, but it talks a lot about how to help children discover their purpose in life. If you're not quite yet sold on reading a whole book on the topic, maybe you want to read a blog. I'm hoping maybe I can share these slides with folks, but I imagine because there's a hyperlink here. But if not, you can certainly type in 5 ways to foster purpose among adolescents. And there's a blog entry in the Greater Good Science Center, which is through UC Berkeley. And it outlines some additional strategies that you can employ to help the young people in your life discover their purpose. And then I talked about that interview that in that study that we conducted, the sort of accidental intervention. This was so effective that researchers actually took the interview and put it online and included along with it some guidelines that parents could use to apply, to conduct this interview with the adolescents in their lives. So if you put in understanding purpose through interviews just into Google, you should be able to find that document. I also have a hyperlink here. I'll share my slides at the end. And then in addition to that, there is some online tools available at purposechallenge.org. And these are, like I said, online tools that adolescents, parents, and teachers can use to help young people discover their purpose in life. So they have some just pretty simple activities that can be done online, given our current circumstances. That's a plus. And like I said, all of these activities have been tested and found to be really effective in helping young people discover their purpose in life. And then the last is a podcast, the Science of Happiness podcast, called What's Your Why in Life? So if you're interested in just sort of thinking a little bit more about purpose and the role that it plays in young people's lives, you might want to check out that podcast. Okay, so I'm looking at the time and I think we're getting there. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Charlene to organize questions. So I'm going to stop the share on my screen.
All right.
While she starts looking at the question review, I would love to say thank you. I'm pleased and you have some great resources. Kendall, we have some things here I thought were really interesting in your lecture this evening, excuse me, because our 8th graders here, before they go to high school, do a mock interview, and it's with the K-4 parents, and it's a wonderful experience for them, and the children all walk away just impressed that we have questions, and I'm so pleased that has been a tradition here at St. Matthew's, and understand the importance of it now. Our students here love to give back through our St. Vincent Food Locker, but I'm sure we continue to expand and look at ways for us to do this, because that is so important. And most definitely, we are still trying to cultivate that great mindset, right, within our parent community and with our students. So thank you. It was wonderful. I love the resources. I loved everything that you said. And I liked the simplicity of it. I think we sometimes get wiped up. So I think they've read over the questions and answers, and now they're going to fire at you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Again, Kendall, I love all the practical strategies and the tips. I'm really motivated to go and restart my gratitude journal. I know that if you do it, literally for 2 weeks, your life changes, right?
Yeah. That's a surprising amount of research behind such a simple activity.
Right? I've done it with my adult children. Sometimes we'll do it back and forth. Like, this is something parents you can try with your kids. You can email each other. If you are texting, you can text each other. Any way to keep those lines of communication going. So lots of really great tips and strategies tonight. So we have a couple questions coming in. And again, I encourage you folks to write or put questions in the Q&A box. Try to keep them kind of short if you don't mind, so we can get to everybody. This is a good question. How is responsibility related to purpose in one's life?
I think that's a great question. Yeah, I think responsibility is definitely related to this idea of purpose. We focus so much on doing things for our kids, and we don't always ask them, what's your responsibility to your family or to your school or to your community? And I think the slight distinction here is that with purpose, we let the young people sort of decide, how is it that I want to use the skills and the talents that I've been, fortunate enough to cultivate in my life to give back. But I think responsibility is super key and definitely related to this idea of purpose.
Okay, thank you. Great answer. So here's a parent who says, my son always enjoyed in-person service learning, whether school or community-based. He's less interested now that everything is virtual. Any advice for my people person son?
Yes, I have a people person daughter, and so I can definitely relate. It is a challenge. I mean, one of the things my daughter, I guess my answer would really be, you just have to get creative. One of the things that we have done with my daughter is she loves animals and really enjoys taking care of animals. So even during a pandemic, we've been able to foster, kittens and things like that. And I love this activity because once you give the kittens back, they will post pictures online of the family that adopts the kitten. And so it's really neat for her to see that, she started with a little tiny kitten, often one that was found on the streets or something, helped kind of nurse it back to life, and then, sent it on its way into a family that was really grateful for her help. So I do think there are still ways of giving back. But it is definitely tougher in this day and age. We have to get a little creative. I do think too, though, it's important to remember the importance of reflection, because service learning can have all kinds of positive impacts, but those positive impacts are definitely magnified when young people are encouraged to really reflect on the difference that their activities make. So, I guess in some ways I might even pose this question to your young person, how do you think you could give back in this day and age? What do you think you could do? Because you really want it to be something that they care about, that, animals may not be your son's hot button, but there may be something else. And So I would say get creative.
Okay, good one. You know, we always tell people that the point of parent education is to give parents things to talk about with their children, to open up the avenues of communication. And I think you've been so clear tonight about everything that you're saying starts with the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't imposed by the parent, it's eliciting, right, that partnership with your child about finding their purpose. And I remember Bill Damon literally saying, every child may not have a passion, but every child can have a purpose, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that listening is so key, especially as kids get older. I mean, I think one of the reasons that the interview turned out to be such an effective, if unintentional, kind of intervention is that we as researchers, we had no agenda. We just wanted to learn from the young people. And I think they really appreciated that, you know, we were active listening, parroting back what they had said to us, what we heard, pushing further, but we were not nudging them in a particular direction. And so I think that the write-up on the interview that I listed on that resources page, it emphasizes that the importance of really listening to your children and not pushing them in a particular direction. And that's not easy as parents, right? We all have things that we hope for our children, and so we often do nudge them. So this is an important context in which to really just practice being an open-minded listener.
Well, there you go. We're doing an event tomorrow. You parents are all welcome to join us, called Managing Emotionally Intense Conversations with Your Children. I know none of you during the pandemic have ever had an intense conversation with your children, right? Here's a parent who asked, this interesting, you just mentioned your research, Kendall. Can you tell us more about your study? Did you have a sense of how many kids did talk about purpose at home before talking to the researchers?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely parental input is huge. I think that we did not ask that particular question. Have you talked about this with your parent? But we had a lot of young people spontaneously say, you know, these are conversations that I have had at home or that I have had at school. And we've done other research where we followed young people for years and interviewed parents and things like that. And so from this research, we know that parents play a really important role. As kids get older, obviously, and into adolescence, so too do their peers, and so too do their schools and their communities and those kinds of things. But yeah, parents definitely shape the values and the beliefs that their children hold. And really, at the foundation of a purpose is a value or a belief, right? It's something that you believe is really important to you, something that you want to, you know, make progress toward, make a change around. So, yeah, we didn't ask that particular question, but spontaneously we heard a lot about the important roles that parents played. And like I said, many of the suggestions, modeling purpose, just engaging in these kinds of conversations around the far horizon aims, those are the kinds of things that young people said that were helpful to them.
Just so fascinated by your research. It's all so interesting. Okay, here we go. Another good question. My kids are often resistant to learning when there are no obvious applications to real life scenarios. Do you have any recommendations around fostering a purpose in learning? Even when I explain that some of the things are building blocks, they still don't buy it.
Yeah, no, this is tough. I mean, this is really tough. I think that this is also an opportunity for teachers, right? To think about how, because again, especially the older kids, they tend to be very attuned to information coming from sources, not only from their parents, but also from the broader community. So I think it's also important for teachers to think about this. How can they contextualize the learning in this broader picture, right? Why do we need to learn algebra? What exactly, how am I going to use this? And, you know, I think this is something that in some cases, teachers are almost better prepared to do than parents, only because and sometimes parents may not know. But I do think that, you know, in general, right, a lot of times the things that we want to do, the things that give our lives purpose, they do require some sort of higher education. And so whether or not that particular class is directly relevant to their ultimate aim in life, they know they need to do well in, or hopefully you could emphasize, they just need to do well in school so that, you know, if they want to go on to, you know, help people through medicine, that they can get into med school or a good nursing program or, you know, whatever is of interest to them. But like I said, I would also see what you can do to recruit the teachers to help you a little bit, because they might have a better understanding of exactly how this specific class that doesn't seem directly relevant to everyday life, how it is really relevant, how it relates to a young person's future goals.
I think that's a great question, especially at a school like St. Matthew, where you parents and students are partners with the teaching staff. So great one. Boy, we're getting really good questions here, Dr. Bronk.
I agree.
In those who do have a purpose, do they tend to stay static over time, or do they change over time?
That is a fantastic question. The purposes in life do tend to evolve. So let me give you an example. We did this longitudinal study where we followed a handful of young people over the course of adolescence and young adulthood. So a little later in life, it was more like 17 or 18 up to the early 20s. And the interesting thing is we saw a really interesting evolution in the purposes. So I'll just give you one example. One person we followed was a young man from Southern California. And when we first interviewed him, he was really interested in gun control. And there had been a number of shootings near his home, near his school. They really scared him. And this is how he got interested in this issue of gun control. But then he went to college. And at college, he was introduced to other issues, things like nuclear proliferation. And so his interest really did evolve. He moved from this, focus on gun control to a really broader focus on nuclear arms. And he said to us, they're really just bigger guns. And then later on, we followed him out of school, and it was so interesting. He became a journalist. And he said, the thing is, I realized that I loved knowing all of the facts about this. And I loved sharing that information with my friends and family. So whether it was facts about gun control or nuclear proliferation or some other issue that is really important to the lives of people, I want to be the one who gets to sort of, dive deep into the research, become an expert on it, and share the information with the people who I care about in my world. And so you definitely see an evolution in this young person's purpose. And that was not uncommon. It was interesting that even as a journalist, he continued to follow a lot of these gun control issues and nuclear proliferation. It wasn't like he went in a completely different direction. But yes, definitely purposes evolve over time. Oftentimes people have more than one purpose too. And, if for those of us who find purpose in parenting, that might not have couldn't have been a purpose before. So it emerged, later in life. So yeah, these purposes, they're very dynamic, and they do evolve, but they tend to not change completely. They don't go into a direction that's unrecognizable. But that's why I call it more of an evolution than like just a dramatic change.
So here's a question. We often think about purpose with a capital P, like purpose. If you have a kid who just is not there yet, do you think it's better to think about affinities and just encourage the things that they like to do?
That's right. Yeah. I think it's important if they're younger children and they haven't really identified affinities, get them involved in lots of different things. And again, we know this is effective from talking with people with really strong purposes in life about what they did early in life. But yeah, and as they get older, I think you also want to, identify the things that they enjoy, the things that they're really good at, and ask them, what are some things that concern you about the world today? Or what are some things that you would like to see different? One of the questions we have in this interview is, imagine you've been given a magic wand and you can change whatever you wanted to change in the world. What would you want to be different, and why? And sometimes a question like that helps them start to think about, what is the issue in the broader world that I want to contribute to, whether it's, an artistic pursuit, a religious pursuit, a career, professional pursuit, but helping them to think about that can help orient help them start to think about, what am I good at and how can I use this special skill or talent to make a difference that I care about in the broader world. So I think it's kind of each of those things.
Well, and speaking of which, this is a kind of a good basic question that you probably get a lot. can you clarify the difference between passion and purpose?
Yeah. No, this is really important. I think the other thing that, a passion is something that you care about, and it may be something that is very self-oriented, right? So I have to admit, I'm kind of passionate about playing tennis. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. But I don't see it as a way for me to really contribute to the broader world. So, tennis might be a passion of mine, but I would say I find much greater purpose in being a parent, right? And trying to raise children who I think will be good citizens, good contributors to the broader world. I also find a lot of purpose in my work, in trying to contribute in some small way to this larger body of research around purpose and positive youth development. So a passion may be a very self-focused interest, whereas a purpose is motivated by a desire to give back to the broader world.
I think that's beautiful. And as you said, even very young children can feel inspired to help out, right?
Absolutely. And it's just so important for them to recognize that they can be useful. I mean, we have this tendency to kind of do everything for younger children, and that really strips them of the opportunity to see themselves as agentic and as important and as really needed by the broader world. So yeah, a lot of the young people who end up going on to lead these wonderful lives of purpose talk about experiences fairly early in life, often in elementary school, where they were first introduced to an issue that they found out they were, really well prepared to make a difference in. And so, yes, I think it's very important to help young people. I mean, you have to be realistic about, contributions to the family and the more immediate community and school, but to help them see that they can indeed make really important contributions to the world around them.
Absolutely. I love the research on babies that shows that people seem to be sort of hardwired for altruism, right? The babies don't like the puppets who are mean to the other puppet.
It kind of gives you hope in humanity, right?
It does. All right, we have one last question, Dr. Bronk, and then we will wrap it up. But again, thank you for all the wonderful resources and all the strategies and all the tips tonight. I'm going to go back and use them with my own kids, even though they're grown up. All right. Here's a parent who says, thank you so much for the presentation. How do you align purpose and your values?
Yeah, this is really interesting. One of the online tools that we created actually presents young people with a list of values, and it has them really prioritize, of these values, which of the 3 that are most important, and 3 that are least important, and the rest, I think it's 7 that are just sort of neither important or not important. But those values are, like I said, those are really the foundation of your purpose in life. They really should be one and the same. And so I think that sometimes we were talking before about how purposes evolve, and probably if we stood back and we looked at the value probably really didn't change over time. It's that sort of constant thing, like caring about family or wanting to enact social or political change. The means in which you go about it might actually be the things that evolve or change over time. So the value should really be at the core of the purpose. It is the thing that you're trying to that you care about, that motivates you. And so the extent that we can help children think deeply about what it is that they value. Again, this is why purpose is more naturally evolves around adolescence, or emerges, I should say, around adolescence, because this is the time that young people really are checking in with their values and thinking critically for the first time about, what do I believe in? What do I really care about? And as a result, this is also the time they're more likely to reflect on their purpose in life.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end it on, Kendall Bronk, because I know that you parents have children here at St. Matthew's School, so you value family, you value parenting, you value education. Your being with us tonight shows that. Again, a big special thank you to Dr. Peterson for hosting us tonight and welcoming us. And again, thank you, Kendall. Any last words, Adrienne, for us?
No, thank you. And thank you for answering the questions as best we could. We had so many good questions in the chat room, and I know you didn't get to all of them. So we will, I think you give us your contact and stuff. So I'm sure it was well worth our time.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and good night. Have a good evening.